Topic of this evening's Dharma talk is embarrassment. A lot can be said about that, and a lot can be ignored about that. Interesting area, especially when talking about the ego or finding what is the ego, what is the self-centeredness, that aspect of our life that shows up as someone who likes this, doesn't like that, and is always constantly judging everything on some level, maybe a mini level or maybe really big level. Interesting thing about embarrassment is people that get embarrassed are actually closer to awakening than the people who are never embarrassed, because their embarrassment is so covered up by conclusions, opinions, pride, aggression, and all the other ways we avoid sensitive areas. So to be embarrassed about something is to see someone who's embarrassed about saying the wrong word or saying something incorrectly, and then they're corrected by someone else. Right down to table setting, how to set the table. Come in and set the table and have someone come back and say, no, the butter knife actually goes, well, actually there's no butter knife. And then, it's like, oh, got that wrong. We all have all kinds of stories about embarrassment, about things that are touchy for us in that way. So the main thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to respond to a question, and someone actually asked me to talk on this. So when I thought about it, I thought, well, I don't know what to say about that. But here I am talking about it. And the way it shows up for me is that little embarrassment. I mean, I can give you I don't often give too many personal anecdotes, maybe 30 or 40 of them. Here comes another one. But I remember how embarrassed I was in 1990 when Kobentino Roshi was at my house, actually here in Michigan. I just remembered so it's hard to put it into words, but I was embarrassed because I didn't know who I was even talking to. I kept trying to conclude something about him and I couldn't. And it actually took many, many years for me to even realize who was in my house that day. And that's kind of embarrassing because I just practiced with Trungpa Rinpoche for about 17 years, which includes lots and lots of solitary retreats and long periods of meditation. I would say a bunch of it. And still, I could not recognize an awakened master when I met him face to face. It's embarrassing. It was embarrassing at the time. A little embarrassing now, but embarrassment can't really find anybody who's embarrassed. So is that a credential? Do whatever you want with it. I could go down a long list of embarrassments, as I'm sure all of you could. So the important part about embarrassment is the leading edge of your identity is always out there, unless you're severely or heavily handicapped by constant opinion, constant clamping down, constant, what do they call those? A know-it-all. Someone always knows everything. They can't get embarrassed because they just know stuff. And even if they're wrong, they'll show you some way where, no, you're wrong. I think we know a few famous people like that. Absolutely no, what do we call it? Shame. It's the same thing as embarrassment, maybe. But no remorse. If you say something, do something, hurt someone, or have some kind of an error which is noticeable to everyone, it's never you. It's always somebody else. In other words, how your feeling, whatever that may be, is somebody else's fault. That's not responsible for your emotions. Blame someone else for it. That'll work for a while. So of course, the downside of feeling embarrassed is it sucks. Who wants that? The upside of it is it's a tender part of your identity that is not particularly defended. Otherwise, that embarrassment wouldn't be there. Something you've done, some kind of a social faux pas or other kind of mistake. You were supposed to do something, and then you suddenly realize, oh, I was supposed to do that, and I did not. I let someone down, and they're waiting there, maybe in the car, waiting for us, or at the store, or at the bus stop, or somewhere. We let them down, so we're embarrassed. This points right to the self-centeredness. That's where you can start there. There's lots of levels to go even deeper than that. Question?
Sokuzan, you said that there are lots of levels or layers to it. So how do we begin to investigate those levels or those layers?
I think it's just a matter of continuing. Each person with the causes and conditions that arise as you, or as Unyo, or as me, or Kiyun, or anyone, that are going to be completely, well, you already know that. I'm not telling you anything new, are so incredibly different. But that particular word is what's being referred to there is that area of the consciousness where there's some kind of shame or some kind of, call it embarrassment, and it's like shame or just a shame. And that is, the idea there is the self. There's some kind of a being that we think we are. And to give you a simple example, if somebody comes in the room and says, Shoka, come out here, what are you grinning for?
I was thinking about the movie star comment that you made.
Movie what?
You guys seen a movie?
What? Bring it on. What is it? Do you know?
When you said he's kind of tall and looks like a movie star, but then you'll talk to him and you think, no.
Yeah. Did she tell you that? Was that embarrassing? Yeah. Well, that's a start. You mean I can insult you and you won't be embarrassed? And then I can insult you behind your back, gossip about you, make fun of you in another room to one of your fellow residents, and she can come up and tell you about it. Isn't that embarrassing? You may be further along a path than I thought. Usually when I insult people, I can't remember. So it's not about getting rid of that. It's not about getting rid of anything, but actually use that. That's you, by knowing what that's like, knowing what the embarrassment is like. This is how you can help others. You don't have to, because you can see that even the ego that is offended or embarrassed or, kind of worried about what people are going to think, it's unreal. So if it's unreal, you don't have to get rid of that person. Yes?
Sokuzan, is the embarrassment that arises in the teacher-student relationship different than embarrassment that arises from something simple like not setting the table correctly?
Well, if it's with a true teacher, then there isn't anyone else. There isn't anyone but you. So there's quite a bit of difference. One is more relative and the other is ultimate. Are you embarrassed about a rainstorm?
A rainstorm?
Yeah, are you? Okay, more progress. Good question.
Sokuzan, some time ago you pointed out some things that were very difficult, and it was really extremely extremely embarrassing. And you immediately said, how do you think I feel?
Yeah.
And what were you pointing to?
Not separate. Not separate. There are no separate beings anywhere. It's an incredibly powerful illusion of separation to think there are separate beings. We're not saying that there's someone here and someone there, and someone is leaving the building, someone else is coming in, someone is old, someone's young. Just all the variations. But there isn't any one fundamentally present. There's no identity. But that doesn't mean that the causes and conditions that arise as dependent origination, basic teaching of the Buddha, there are no separate things anywhere. Everything comes from some kind of apparent other situation. And things come together, the 10,000 things, as it's often said, come together to form separate, apparent, the illusion of identity and separation. It's not that it's not there, it's just that there's no fundamental, there's nothing substantial there because it won't last. When I say, how do you think I feel? I'm just saying I'm going through the same thing you are. Same thing comes and goes. What's the difference? You know? I've been telling you for years, what would I say? Just pretend that you're one of those ventriloquisms. Am I embarrassed about saying that wrong? Are you embarrassed about hearing it right when I said it wrong? Who's embarrassed about what? Yes, keep smiling.
Sokuzan, can embarrassment arise in ways that are other than the emotional texture, emotional quality?
I think it can. You can have embarrassments that you don't share with anyone because they're just too embarrassing. No one ever knows, but you know. It's like Suzuki Roshi once said, if someone is watching you, you can hide from them. But if no one is watching you, you can't hide from yourself. What is that saying? In other words, the other word would be responsible for who you are instead of trying to cover up or be better or improve. Like I often say, don't improve. That doesn't mean you should relatively improve at some things, but the spiritual path is not about improvement, even though sometimes it's presented that way. You're the one that asked for the talk.
Sokuzan, when
I shaved his head earlier. Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt. It was something superfluous.
when you do something that triggers embarrassment, in me, is that embarrassment already there, just covered up?
Well, the self-centeredness is shielded with ideas, opinions, conclusions, labeling, naming, all kinds of concepts. That's protected. So we're not trying to get rid. People are trying to get rid of dependent origination. They don't want certain things. They want other things. So they don't want emotions or feelings or thoughts that look threatening or bothersome, whatever. But the one who sees what this is, one who's clear about this, is not concerned about what's coming and going. So they don't mind how they feel, because they're not operating out belief in feelings or belief in thoughts. This doesn't mean they don't have incredibly outrageous feelings of warmth or love or irritation or everything. Everything gets to come and go. It's like an open building where everything just flows backwards and forwards and in and out, all over the place. Is that helpful? questions? You're gonna ask me a question? Nicole.
Getting embarrassed.
Nicole is so embarrassed because she's never asked me a question. Well, there was that one time. So, okay, you ask me a question, then I'll go to show. So as soon as you say that, I'll immediately go to him. So you don't have to be embarrassed. Go ahead.
I'm wondering how we can work within the embarrassment instead of running from it.
Oh my goodness, what a great question. It is. It's just a matter of having a willingness to just have that feeling instead of slowly levitating out of the feeling for how to stop it, who caused it, why it shouldn't be happening, who's really to blame for this sort of situation I'm having such trepidation or fear or suffering over. To stay in it. This is what the Bodhisattva path is about. Be with all things, starting with your own emotions about everything. Nothing to fix. Your true nature, who you are, not your ego, but who you are fundamentally, is completely without flaw. But you have to realize it. Because you can't just think your way into it, even if you talk to, psychologists or therapists, or not, they can't help you somewhat, but it's not the spiritual path. More? Better ask something, I'm going to show. So that's a good question. So coming back to it one more, just if you can, when you feel that, just no covering, no abandoning that for what it's about, or what caused it, or how you could stop it, or why you shouldn't be there, or there it goes again. Any of the rotations around it, just if you can. And it's not about maintaining it, but just feel the texture of that. It's like feeling of a carpeting. It's like if you live in the cereal city, you'll have lots of boxes of cornflakes. You can just reach in there and just feel the cornflakes. You don't have to know what's in the box. Just feel the texture.
So usually I have a tendency to hide from embarrassment. So if I notice that after I'm already hiding, should I endeavor to get myself out of that?
I wouldn't do much with it. Whatever is happening is dependently risen. So less meddling is the best way. But be aware of what just occurred. Just notice that you're trying to get out of it. Just watch it. Just like you would watch a child, getting into trouble, but not getting into danger. Getting into trouble maybe, but not getting into danger. So a little tension on the leash, or whatever you want to call it, but not too much. Soft touch. Chisho.
Kishabhai. Back to Shoka's question. Uh, I can't understand how there can be an embarrassment between a teacher and a student, especially if the student has given the benefit of doubt to the teacher. Wow.
That question for Shoka?
I was wondering, is that even possible, or is there that is an indication of not completely giving benefit of doubt to the teacher?
That would be correct. But that being said, Chisho, it's also the awareness of not doing that. And so that might take some time to trust the teacher. Ideally, the thing to do is to trust the teacher, but there's no propaganda around that. That would be up to you. But you'd start out by, well, I'm going to study under this teacher. I need to give the benefit of the doubt to them. And that's not easy to do, because the teacher is forever throwing sand in your eyes. Ego language, of course. But they look like they're obstructing you. They look like they're criticizing you, or they look like they're taking advantage of you, but they're not. Plenty of room for questions around that one.
Christopher Bowling. So I've witnessed other people in full-on like embarrassment. Is there something I can do, if anything, or should I do anything, or should I just look away, or like what? Do I play a role in it?
We play a role in everything, but I would say just it's situational. So you might do any one of those things depending on what the situation was. But recommendation I give to everyone about anything, if you don't know what it is, just don't do anything. Don't do anything unless you have to. If you're doing something you don't have to, then some of that embarrassment or whatever the situation is you're trying to control something, you're trying to stop something, you're trying to start something based on your discomfort. So just receive it. If you see that, if it's really giving the person a hard time, you could drop your gaze. Just don't look right in their eyes. They already have enough attention on themselves.
Sato bowing. That's one thing when I feel embarrassment in front of doing something embarrassing in front of other people. What's ego's game when there's nobody else around and I'm still feeling embarrassment about something?
It's just self-consciousness and keeping track of how you're doing, and if you're doing better, and if you're doing pretty good, and things are getting, and then suddenly you do something, you see something that you've done that's nobody even knows about. There's still embarrassment. So when you say what is it, it's just more embarrassment, but not the kind that other people are looking at. It's like Suzuki Roshi's statement there. If somebody's watching you, you can hide from them. But if no one is watching you, you can't really hide from yourself. And this would be applicable to people who are training their mind. People who have no mind training, even if they have 180 IQ, that high intelligence is going to go into protecting an imaginary self called ego. But if a person can be of average or even low intelligence, and if they have a spiritual path, there's a possibility of opening into the fundamental nature of reality, which was pointed out by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, that everything is dependent. There isn't any solid being anymore.
A question from Melissa in Portland. Just recently today, I was insulted at work by an angry golfer in front of a young person who I supervise. It was hurtful, embarrassing. How do I use embarrassment as a way to teach?
Well, first of all, it depends on what you're going to teach. If you're teaching golfing, I don't know. But if you're teaching the Dharma, I wouldn't teach it. Don't teach the Dharma until you have to, until it's choiceless. Because if you're teaching out of your knowledge of the Dharma, we tend to get trapped into all the forms and everything, all the concepts about the teaching, instead of teaching out of what we see. So coming back to my understanding of what might have been going on, especially since I know you, Melissa. It was Melissa, wasn't it? Better be. Somebody would have taken her job. That's not good. I would say if the person who, you have to give some credit to the young person that was in your employ or whatever, and give them some credit, and maybe talk to them later and ask them how that looked to them. Don't help them with it. How did that look to you? You might be surprised to find out that they were pretty amazed by the way you handled it, the way you didn't buy into the irritation or anger or rage or accusatory tone of the person who was berating you or whatever was happening. So I wouldn't necessarily think you have to, knowing you don't have to, who you are is hanging out all over the place also. So you're not about harming or hurting anyone particularly.
A question from Kelly in Grand Rapids.
Kelly.
Is embarrassment a power struggle?
I think there's a little bit of power struggle there, but it's more evidence that an aspect of our imaginary self is highly sensitive, and it's the downside is it doesn't feel very good, but the upside is that's an arrow pointing right at something you believe is true that is completely false. Well, I'm not sure exactly how you're characterizing power struggle. I wouldn't disagree, because I'm feeling there's a way that this should be talked about, that it could show up that way. And if I were to talk to you about it, you're likely to be able to do that. With the way in which I'm talking about it here, it's just we're embarrassed about who we are, what we're doing. We feel ashamed, perhaps. The downside of it is we feel that way. The upside of it is that might be an easier Dharma gate to enter than the one that is full of pride and bluster, pretentiousness, opinions, because it's softer. It's just a softer area where we are willing to be responsible for what we did. But what goes on top of that is not only we did that, but then we feel like we goofed up or we've done something wrong when actually we may not have done anything incorrect at all. Just it was an error, a mistake. So for us to abandon what occurred for how we feel about what occurred, then you're right back to narcissism. A low level of it. It's not the kind that's out rampant all over the place, enslaving people. But it's still living out of an assumption that what you think is true. And don't believe your thoughts. Don't disbelieve your thoughts. And don't ignore them.
Sokuzan, is there embarrassment that isn't hooked into pride or shame?
How's it look to you? What brought about the question? Just because you wanted to ask me a question, or you were told by Chazon, start asking questions? Didn't he say that? You said it. Okay.
Sokuzan, I guess it's just from the way that you're talking about it tonight. I didn't really quite see that it's hooked into pride or shame. So I'm just wondering if embarrassment is another form of shame.
It is.
So is there an embarrassment that isn't an aspect of or is tied into shame?
Yeah, but it lasts. It's just a flicker. It has no status as some kind of a valid thought or item or something. So we just have a slight embarrassment over mixing things up, and other people are standing around and say, no, that's incorrect. That goes over here. And say, oh, that's right. So a little flash of embarrassment, but not much, not enough to have any continuity. You would not even particularly remember it, but a little bit of being corrected by someone, or corrected by you see that you've done something completely backwards, which other people have done completely forward. You're wrong. But it doesn't last. It has some kind of equanimity or balance to it. So you never can, you can't have your way with everything. Some people have so much puffed upness and pride. It might not look like pride. They just cannot be wrong about anything. I'm sure we all know somebody that no matter what happens, they have a reason why it's that way. No matter what. Donnie, you like that? Sure. Better not be.
Juju going, my boss is like that. And
What's his name?
Trent.
I've been hearing about him for years, haven't I? Yeah, go ahead.
It looks like if he feels any sort of embarrassment for something that's gone wrong, he blames someone else.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating to be on the end of that or to watch him do that.
Yeah,
how do I work with that?
Knowing you, you probably already are, aren't you? Is that the Sokukoji Mudra? I don't know. I think it's very situational. I think if you're there and you're involved in whatever situation is happening, there could be an opening there where you could say something to them about it. Mention it. If it's at a distance, maybe if somebody's being hurt or harmed, you could maybe talk to them a little bit. But he's your boss, and how many people work there?
8 or 9.
No. So you can't make him into somebody else. Didn't she divorce him? Yeah. I know it's all sarcastic. And not that he was a terrible person. Who knows what kind of causes and conditions entered into his life stream when he was 3 or 4 years old, and how he was treated and what he's trying to protect. The causes and conditions are unsearchable, because they're searchable, but you're not going to find anything except more cracker crumbs in the forest. And you just keep following the cracker crumbs, trying to find your way out of there. So better off to just stay where you're at and look at what arises. Go ahead.
Nothing more from me, but there's a question from Jethro in the UK.
Jethro.
Since I have been working at home more due to the pandemic, I have noticed strong feelings of awkwardness and self-consciousness whenever I walk around in public. This is something I haven't experienced in many years. What, if anything, can I do or not do to alleviate this?
I'll stay home, for one thing. I continue to use this word situational because it very much is the case. I would have to be. I would have to talk to you more about it. Or something. Assuming you're a meditator, lots of sitting practice helps us deal with things that are those kind of emotions in a more direct and you could even say responsible way. In other words, you're responding to what's there, not responding to what you think is there. That's not often mentioned when talking about this kind of a situation. So I also don't know, I don't think we've ever talked. I don't know for sure. I don't know how old you are. That doesn't mean everything, but it's quite a bit sometimes. Literally, I would say stay home. Don't expose yourself to that. Stay home and face the wall. I'm very biased here. If I could get just go out and, as soon as some guy a little while ago was talking about the wall, and I said, yes, the wall. But it was a different wall he was talking about. He was talking about a wall to imprison people, and a wall to help people train their mind. Sit down wall. The 6th century, 7th century Bodhidharma came from China. It came from India to China to teach the Dharma, and he was the legend that he cut out his eyelids, I think, which he didn't. That's just a legend to tell you what, in no uncertain terms. He kept his eyes open. That's all that means. Sit down, face the wall. He did 9 years. You can do more. 9 years is quite a bit, but you could do 10 or 11. Sit down, hold still, and watch what is moving in the mind stream. And it won't be easy to do that, but this seems to be necessary in order to deeply understand the nature, the fundamental nature, the absolute nature, not just the relative nature. Relative is, everybody got that figured out.
Kevin Bowing. Oh, sorry.
Please, you go ahead. Go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin Bowing. What is occurring when we feel embarrassed for somebody else? Bowing.
So it depended a lot of dependency there, who it is and how close we are to them, or, but it's very similar, except that you're transferring that over to them. So it's still embarrassment, and it's still about somebody who's doing something wrong, or somebody who's mistaken, or someone who's making a fool of themselves. As I've sometimes said, and this is something that I understood from having a teacher like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, is if you're a fool, you realize you're a fool, nobody can make a fool of you. It's just like saying no one can embarrass you. This doesn't mean that embarrassment might not show up somewhat, but it doesn't last long. It's just there, and then it gets its lifetime, or it gets its longevity from an imaginary self who doesn't want to be embarrassed, or from an imaginary self who is kind of cringing at that, or some other person who is projecting onto that person how they would feel if they were in that position. In other words, somewhat along the lines of what you're asking about. So it is not about correcting any of that. It's not about getting rid of anything, explaining it away. It's about awareness, and awareness through all the various causes and conditions that arise as our suffering, as our difficulty, as samsara, as a sickness, aging, and death, all of the things that we're put upon as being human beings. Train your mind to see fundamentally what is true. If you see it, you're still going to be here. You still might even get embarrassed. You still might have embarrassment. You still might have all kinds of things come and go, but it will not occur to a separate being, to someone.
Nice show, bowing.
Nice show. Go ahead.
Earlier when you were talking about saying embarrassing things about Shoka and feeling the embarrassment yourself, is that the same as transferring it onto another?
Yeah, same thing. Puzzling, isn't it? It's the same thing. The teacher is not separate from anything, in particular those who consider themselves students. It's just that there's no solid person there anymore. It doesn't mean that it doesn't show up, and in this case have a robe and have a monastery and have students. But ultimately, there's no one there. This is not something to promote. This is something to realize. Realize it. Realize it at your kitchen table. Realize it at your local food mart or whatever. Realize it as you're taking out the trash in the morning or in the evening. Realize it. If you don't realize it, then it just becomes a thought of something you're trying to accomplish or understand or read about or conclude about or think about. It has to be seen. It is sometimes called a direct perception. And it's not a direct perception of something else. And it's not a direct perception of someone. It's just perception. Further, nice show. Further question?
Nice show, bowing. I know there's a question, but I can't find it yet. Bowing.
It's the best kind. Best kind of question. Yes, they're done.
Don bowing. It seems like embarrassment involves a lot of my projection of what other people are thinking. So how do I relate to you as a teacher without worrying about what you're thinking?
You better worry about what I'm thinking.
I do. If that brings embarrassment up, is that
That's right.
just part of the teaching? No?
Yep, it's going to be different for each person. It's so incredibly different. That's why if you teach this as a general teaching, it works to some extent, but at some point you or me or any of us, you have to meet a true teacher. I'm not making any claims for myself being that. Only you would know that.
Done bowing is my thought that you're a true teacher of my projection.
Yeah,
Bowing.
always. Everything is a projection.
So I'll just look
So
at
what are you
that.
doing here?
Learning.
Yeah, okay. You got it. That's what you're doing. You're here to learn something. Absolutely. Thank you.
Ivan Bowing.
Yes, Ivan.
I have a degree of embarrassment or perhaps shame in that I have not followed your basic instructions of face. Yeah, I know it. That's don't lay it on me too hard. Your basic instructions of facing the wall, sitting and facing the wall.
Yes.
And so I hesitate to ask you for further direction when I don't even follow that basic.
You're not unusual. Everybody's, doing stuff behind my back.
Or not.
Or not. No, you should come forth. Is that embarrassing?
For myself, I'm embarrassed. I am embarrassed of myself. I don't suspect you're embarrassed of me, or I'm embarrassed of you, or I'm certainly confused, especially at this moment.
Okay. Sounds good to me. What's your question?
What's up with the sense of embarrassment in front of you?
So I think it's just that if you're looking at someone that you, from your experience, you see that they basically are just looking at you. They're just on receive. They're just receiving. You might have the feeling that they're receiving things about you you'd prefer not to be seen. So at least that was my experience of meeting the Vidyadhara, the Chogyam Trungpa. Felt like he could read my mind. I don't think he needed to read my mind. All he had to do is just look at me, and he could see I was nuts. That I was all tied up in my thought patterns and stuff. It was very embarrassing to meet him, but I did it anyway. I just became kind of stubborn about it. So it might be a similar situation for you. I don't know. I don't detect any. Doesn't look like you're particularly embarrassed. But you may be.
Well, uncomfortable anyway. So
Take a nap.
I did that earlier.
You're way ahead of me. What I'm saying by that, I'm saying just relax. Relaxing into the discomfort is part of it. Just do it anyway. Just relax into it if you can. That isn't going to solve every problem, but at least it allows us to be there and receive whatever's coming from the teacher, from the teaching, from the community. All three are important.
Okay. Thank you.
Nice show.
Nice show, bowing.
Yes.
Do other emotions and feelings have that same transference when we feel it, what feels like with another, like with someone else?
Yes. And and nice show. It depends on the person, depends on the chemistry, depends on I mean, you can go down and find 15 or 20 different ways that that can show up, and even that's an understatement. We are connected in so many ways that we can't even trace or recognize. So, but yes, sometimes it shows up as what, empathy. Sometimes can just be irritation because we can sense a person's confusion, and other people are not sensing that. We're sensing that, and we would like them to be more responsible for their craziness, the other way around. We're feeling embarrassment. What was it, Kevin? Perhaps was saying we feel embarrassment for someone who's in an embarrassing situation, and we feel embarrassed for them. So all of those are ways in which it shows up that we're really not fundamentally separate from each other. We're sharing this world. This is our world. This is my world. It's your world. And some people are so incredibly insane in it that they build all kinds of partitions and opinions, ideas, conclusions, beliefs, and they believe them so strong and are so terrified that they'll actually kill others. They'll kill some of us because they're so sure that they are threatened somehow. And what is threatened? Something that is unreal in the first place, in every place. Self-centeredness, ego. There's certainly a body here. There's certainly everywhere. Body, mind, complex, form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness. The 5 skandhas. That's the description, the classical description. Does not add up to someone. And how does that break down? I'm not the first one to say this, but the form is self-existing. It just has its own dynamics. Form, the body. It's just the body. A feeling just has its own dynamic. Perception or perception impulse, it's just perception. And then thinking, it's just thinking. Thinking is fine. It just doesn't get to drive the choo-choo train. What is it? It's just a passenger like everything else. Who's driving? There isn't anyone driving. There is no authority. Don't believe anything I say. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to present the Dharma as I understand it, coming down from the Buddha as best I can. Same thing with the 6 sense fields and their objects. Those are independent. The I mind is totally on its own. It's connected with other, there's a hallway where there's other doors, but there's just I mind. There's just I. It's just receiving the light, the brilliance, the roundness, the squareness, the distance of everything. It's like living in an incredible mosaic or painting all the time. Didn't mean to get all romantic there. Go ahead, Christopher.
Christopher bowing. My question is, can embarrassment ever lead to something that's non-poisonous?
Probably. Probably. I don't know anything for sure, but probably. Got an example of that?
You mean like an example of embarrassment leading to something that's non-poisonous?
Yes.
I haven't done that much thinking.
Me either.
I overthink.
I underthink. We should team up. Under and over.
I'd love to.
I was kidding. Yes.
A question from Lyd, L-Y-D.
Is that for Lydia or lidocaine? There's a couple other ones. I'm not going to use those. Go ahead.
I am often self-conscious or embarrassed, so I carefully monitor my behavior. Should I be more concerned about being genuine rather than worrying about others' judgment? I feel like I might be nursing my ego.
I wouldn't do anything with that at all. I wouldn't modify. The way I'm hearing you say that, the only thing I would emphasize is mind training, make sure you spend some time training your mind. Get to the wall, sit down. Don't have to be a Buddhist. Don't have to join me or anybody. But I think the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, are important. But the main thing is sit down, hold still, and watch the craziness of the mind without stopping it, fluffing it up, or accepting it, or ignoring it. And then that area that you're asking about there will start to resolve itself in a way that you had not expected. Especially if you do nothing with that at all, but just the only thing you add in there. I'm not saying, for all I know, you're sitting 3 or 4 hours a day. And if you are sitting 3 or 4 hours a day, I hope your eyes are open. When I say I hope for much, but that would be a good one. Have your eyes open so all the sense fields, because as soon as you close the eyes, everything else gets the same message and it shuts down. That's why it feels like samadhi. Not samadhi. It's not mindfulness necessarily. Keep the eyes open. Take it on the chin. You got it coming. You're here. Of course, more stuff's going to happen. Any other questions? So Gwen, is there a fire burning behind you?
So Gwen bowing. Yes. Thanks
for confirming that.
Jason Bowing.
Yes, Jason.
There have been some moments when I've asked you questions or we've had a brief interaction, and I think it usually involved you complimenting me. And I afterwards, I felt some embarrassment in a situation where maybe I would normally actually kind of feel pride. What is that about?
You normally feel what?
Pride.
I don't know. You might have a better handle on that, the way you're describing, the way you're questioning. You might have a better feeling of what's happening there than I would. If you have a more specific question, or if you can turn that around a little bit and make it more of something I can respond to without making assumptions about your person, your personality, what you're dealing with in your life, and so on. So, can you do that, or?
No, I was just noticing how it was something that in most situations it would feel like one thing, and then on the other hand, and then when I'm talking to you in those moments with you, it felt like something else, and I didn't know what that was, and so I was asking about that. I don't need any other information.
Okay, I hear you. I can't respond in a way that has any kind of edge to it that would come close to a response to a question.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you, Bowing.
Certainly. Further questions? Further questions?
Yuhong Bowing. When strong emotions and energies arise, as soon as I label embarrassment, you mentioned that as soon as we label that, it's already shut down or stop looking deeper. So how do I perceive?
It's a very good question. It's just a matter of practice. Nothing lasts. And one of the things that does not last is our concluding something. But if you conclude once, that's not too bad, because that's just kind of impulsive. But then if we conclude on top of that, the next thing we know, we have 15 or 20 conclusions. It's like laminations over that, so you can't see what was originally there. So I would say a little bit. And as Yuhong, as you've heard me say many times, it's not about correcting, or doing something different. It's about being aware of that particular dynamic, how that's showing up. That's in the sitting practice of meditation over time will help you. There's no guarantee, of course, but the way it looks, it will help you see more radically into whatever arises. So instead of something arises and there's a knee-jerk reaction to just add on ideas about what that is, name it, classify it, blame something for it, that tends to start to lose its traction the more we just bring our awareness to just the radical movement of the mind. The very, what is it? Names are, words are failing me, but a very simple approach to the mind stream rather than one that gets us wound up in a knot that keeps saying to us, you can figure this out. Just keep working on it. If you can just figure this out, maybe this will work. Maybe that'll work. Maybe I should talk to him or her. Maybe I should. But to just bring the mind down to stillness, not maintain, not macho stillness, but just stillness. And then silence, of course. The silence is turn off the noise-making machines or whatever. Sit still and watch what continues to move as you've been doing. Just have to do a lot of it because it doesn't show up. Like what is happening there, it doesn't have a result quality to it. Because that buys back that is the transaction that happens in the relative world of doing something and getting somewhere, doing something else and getting credit, doing something else and winning. You know about this. You've been studying languages. You've studied. You're intelligent. Not a compliment, particularly, just an observation. You're an intelligent woman, and you know about doing this and getting that, doing this and getting that. And the practice you're doing now, if you're listening to me, is not about getting anywhere. You don't have to get anywhere because what you're looking for, you are. So you have to see this. If you're interested in this, I'll do everything but push you off the cliff. You might have to jump yourself. And so I'm not talking about suicide or anything horrible. I'm saying it's the feeling of getting right to the edge of your true identity and then wanting to withhold a little bit. Sometimes a lot. I'm just going to keep on practicing, but I'm not going to walk through that forest with too many shadows. It's too scary. It's too difficult. I know about it. I'm saying you can do that. You can do that. And you should do that. And what else are you going to do with your life? But why not realize your true nature? Buddha nature is just a word. We're talking about true nature. You could call it Buddha nature, awakened nature. So the very thing you ask about, it's just a matter of repetition. Just keep coming back to that. And you'll notice that'll slowly start to collapse because you're no longer feeling it. It has to, even the ego needs fuel. It needs passion. I really like this. This is really great. We're really getting somewhere. I think we're on the right track. It needs aggression. That's terrible. That shouldn't be happening. I got to stop doing that. I'm all done with those guys. If they come in here one more time, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Or the other one is ignoring. For this, we talk about this many, many times. And those three, keep an eye on. You don't have to shut them down. That's artificial progress. Don't need it. Just be. And it's difficult because it doesn't feel good to have negative emotions and feelings go through your mind stream because the ego is right there commenting, you should stop feeling this way. You shouldn't feel jealousy. You shouldn't feel anger. You should be kind or good or whatever. This is the ego's, to put it literally, bullshit. It wants control and it wants to be the one who attains awakening. And there is no one. It's disappointing on the one hand, and it's absolutely fantastic on the other hand, because you're liberated from the cage that you might have been in your whole life.
Yuho Baoying, is there any difference between embarrassment and just embarrassment? Baoying.
Embarrassment and just embarrassment? Say that again.
玉红Baoying.
Say it in Mandarin.
你好，老师。
Oh. good.
That means hi, teacher.
You know what? I know what it means. I know that one. I know a couple easy ones. Go ahead.
So my question is there any difference between embarrassment and just embarrassment?
So I'm going to respond to that in the way that you seem to be saying, but I'm definitely receiving, is the embarrassment itself is just an emotion, a feeling, but the naming embarrassment actually prevents us from feeling deeply that embarrassment, which actually would help us transcend because there's no one who's embarrassed. It's an astonishing thing to have intense feelings and emotions come through your mind stream and have no one experiencing it. It is a liberation. I'm not here to promise you anything. You may, as Nagarjuna said, you may realize, you may attain enlightenment, you may not. You may not, but you're certainly not going to attain it, or less likely, unless you work at it, try. Bring yourself back to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the three jewels, back to the cushion, back to watch the mind, observe the mind. And so coming back to your question, the idea of embarrassment, if you leave the feeling of embarrassment for the name of it, it's kind of hard to do that because embarrassment is pretty convincing. But it isn't like you can just, anger is not quite so convincing. You can get away and blame what caused the anger. But when it comes to what caused the embarrassment, it goes right to the fictitious self-centeredness itself. So that self-centeredness, that ego, that pride, that narcissism does not want, it's trying to find some way out of this. And one of the ways to get out of that is to go to the idea of embarrassment, which is, I think, what you're asking about. Just embarrassment. Embarrassment, and embarrassment's the embarrassment, and just embarrassment could be a way of backing out of the embarrassment into, well, it's just embarrassment. I was just embarrassed, which shuts down on that particular emotion or surfacing of that particular form of consciousness that shows up that way, that actually is pointing directly at the insubstantiality of the imaginary self, or narcissism, or the seventh consciousness in the Yogacara tradition. So it's a painful way of pointing, but it's there. So Junchu.
Another question from Jethro.
Okay.
What do you advise people do if they fall asleep while sitting? I'm asking for a friend, definitely not me at all.
Yeah. Well, if it's for your friend, then I would say fall asleep. So, and this is something that comes up. I've been taught other things. All of us have been taught techniques for staying awake. Please don't. If you're listening to me, then you're listening to me. Don't try to stay awake. Fall asleep. Fall asleep. Don't be meditation is not something unnatural. It's not some special, unnatural thing we do. Although from the point of view of our busy life, it's kind of bizarre that we're going to actually sit down and do nothing. But it's just kind of a gap that you sit down and you don't do anything. But if you fall asleep, you're probably sleepy. And you could also not meditate anymore. You could get off the cushion and go lay down. You could take a nap. Some people sleep sitting up. I know someone I met where I was at the mountain seat ceremony of Sohekiji-sama in Kamo, Japan, in about 1992 or something like that. Anyway, I was at his mountain seat ceremony in Kamo, and he was telling my son Mason, who was also a monk, he was saying that when he stayed at the monastery at Eheiji, which was Eheiji was the monastery founded by I think it was founded by Dogen Zenji, wasn't it? Yeah, in the 13th century. And he said he actually trained himself and learned how to sit totally straight up and he goes sound asleep. And of course he's facing a wall, so they can't see if his eyes are open or not. So yeah, he slept. Is that wrong? No, doing exactly what he wanted to do. So I'm not saying you should do that. I'm saying you should fall asleep or take a nap. Notice what it's like to fall asleep. If you're facing a wall and you fall into the wall, you probably only do it one time. And then you'll notice that wall is there. It's like wakes you up. No, not that. It's like, and as far as your friend, yeah, but then as far as, Jethro doesn't, was it Jethro? Yeah, he didn't have that problem. Okay, gotcha.
A question from Nettie.
Nettie,
How to get rid of fleas on my dog without killing? If we kill, what advice?
kill them. It's not about not killing. You can't help but kill some. There are living beings everywhere. You can't walk down the street without stepping on, in the summertime, stepping on ants. You can't help but kill. The idea is keep it to a minimum and be very responsible for anything that you take its life. When I say responsible, it's not to blame, but you have the ability to respond to what it is. So I know it's not a one-off solution to every situation. We have to actually bring our awareness to the situation, be responsible for that being who is alive that we're about to end their life. So you're part of dependent origination. You're not some highfalutin person that's going to be better than everybody else because you never kill anything. It's quite irritating to when I say irritating, I'm not saying that they're wrong, but people quite often get so confused with their mind stream that they try to do helpful things for whomever, people or animals or anything that are in distress, without seeing the big picture, which is the big picture is that's the where you need to work on it. Where is it in your mind stream? You're not separate from anything you're fighting. You're not separate from anything you're supporting. But if you go out into the world, then you've actually given up the complete, fundamental, solid integrity of your mind stream to the world, and it's like going into a forest fire with a bucket of water. You might feel really good. At least I'm doing something. You might get some credit for yourself by doing that, but in order to deal with that forest fire, you have to deal with the nature of fire. A big wide metaphor there, but like people marching and everything. I'm not saying you couldn't do some of that, but the fundamental situation is a misunderstanding about the nature of reality, fundamental primitive beliefs about the nature of reality, according to the Buddha Dharma, but thinking there are separate beings and that you aren't completely responsible for everything all the time. I don't care if it happened 3 years ago and 50 miles away, you're responsible. You need to respond to everything. That doesn't mean you're to blame. It's difficult. I could talk to anyone personally about that if necessary. I don't mean we shouldn't save the whales, of course. But I'm saying we should really look at how that shows up as an issue or problem. Look deeply into the dependent origination that happens there. It's just, we can't go off and just snip off the head of the situation. And so therefore I would say with the fleas, you're gonna have to kill those fleas. Because you don't kind of get off the hook. You don't need, there's no hook to be on. Take care of your dog. Fleas will be fine. If you don't understand, then maybe I've not connected with the nature of your question. Maybe you have to get some help from someone else. But I would take care of that dog. We're good. I think we're going to close now because when you said so, no stuff. And besides, the computer says low battery. Who can I make feel ashamed because of that? Feel ashamed? Okay. The Jisha feels ashamed because she didn't plug it in.
Yeah, we have a fix for that.
Tina says we have to fix.
Yeah, it's very handy, a very handy fix.
You just got saved. Okay. I'm not gonna stand up because I'm old. You guys can stand up.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shihu, shi son bu sa mo po sa, mo po kya ho mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.